Hi, this is Neil Thew from Crew Leader Development, and in this Crew Short, I'm going to talk a little bit about what is adaptive leadership. This is a theory of leadership that's come out of the work of Ron Heifetz and Marty Linsky and their colleagues at Harvard, but really I find it a very practical and effective theory of leadership because it's all about getting the work of leadership done. It's about putting the work of leadership right at the centre of our practice. And the work of leadership in this theory is understood as mobilising people, mobilising other people, because we're leading, mobilising other people to make significant progress on the most pressing and difficult challenges they have. It's also about enabling people to develop a capacity for doing work that at the moment is probably overwhelming them or is a little bit beyond them. Now, there are two features to this theory, two things that we need to learn to do differently. The first thing is we need to learn to see differently, to diagnose the systems in which we find ourselves, to diagnose the adaptive challenges that we're facing in a way which is different from how we've diagnosed them before. Most failures of leadership really are failures of diagnosis, which fail to take into account all the different factors which are necessary to be understood in order for effective actions to be designed. And very often leaders, for all sorts of fully understandable reasons because of the pressures that we're under, but leaders will often leap into action a little bit too quickly with the situation not properly diagnosed, and those actions generally lead to failure. So the first thing we're looking to do is learn to see things differently, and on the basis of that different seeing, we're looking to learn how to do things differently. Leadership is an incredibly difficult thing to do. I think we all acknowledge that. So we're looking to be able to act in ways which are different from ways in which are more effective from ways in which we've been able to act before, and perhaps even to act with a certain degree of grace even when we're in the most difficult and trying of circumstances. Now, two of the metaphors that we use in adaptive leadership work are the metaphors of evolution and of DNA, organisational DNA. Obviously, organisations like organisms evolve and change over time, but for organisms, that evolution is just a result of chance, random mutations. New creatures appear or evolve. Some of them find that they happen to be a really good fit with the environment in which they find themselves, and those are the ones that thrive. If the environment changes, then those creatures stop thriving and become extinct. Well, organisational evolution and the evolution of organisations within the contexts in which they're operating often operates in a very similar kind of way. Evolution looks like it's progressing and things are getting better and better, and then suddenly something changes in the external environment and you can find yourself falling off a cliff edge. So the idea behind adaptive leadership is that we're trying to think about how we would experiment prudently and wisely with the DNA of our organisations and with all the people who are in our organisations in order to allow our organisations to continue to thrive into the future in what are often changing or fast-moving environments. This means that we have to think very carefully about, in terms of our organisational DNA, and the organisational DNA will be our values and our attitudes and our behaviours. Which parts of that DNA do we want to keep? Which of our values and behaviours are so important to us that without them we wouldn't really still be the organisation that we are? So what do we need to keep? What do we need to cut? Which values or behaviours or practices may very well have served us well in the past, may actually feel quite precious to us still, which is why this can be a painful piece of work, but which really in the cold light of day, they're no longer serving our needs, and so they need to be cut. And if they do need to be cut, then actually what DNA, what capacity is it that we now need to develop and grow to replace them? Organisations often, find themselves facing choices of great uncertainty, and the way in which we would measure the effectiveness of adaptive leadership is making sure that we are making progress towards overcoming the most pressing challenges that we're facing and making sure that we're mobilising other people to be doing this work alongside us. We're not trying to somehow do it by ourselves. The approach we take at Crew is that we very much believe in real-time learning. So we try to work with organisations from the outside in, the outside being the work. So we start by putting the work that needs to be done and understanding and identifying that work at the centre of what we do. And then the capacity building that we work with you on is all in the service of achieving that work and making progress on your adaptive challenges. There's a whole range of different tools that we might use depending on the circumstances, and just to give you a flavour of a few of them, We talk about moving between the dance floor where the work takes place and the balcony where we can get a perspective on the work. And we would work with you to make sure that you gain more balcony perspective on what's going on so that you can see more clearly the patterns and the energy flows and the dynamics of the situation in which you find yourself. We'll work with people so that you can learn to create a positive holding environment, we call it, where you can generate the capacity to tolerate a certain degree of heat. In dealing with adaptive challenges and engaging in adaptive leadership, quite significant changes often take place, and these changes will obviously generate heat. Now, the heat itself is no bad thing. You need the heat to generate a certain kind of lift and forward momentum and get things done. Too little heat, and actually there's no real sense of urgency for change. Too much heat, and things can blow up. So one of the things we work on is regulating the heat and making sure that it's optimal. Another thing that we often work with people on is learning to be a little bit more political, understanding the different factions and teams that are at play, understanding that people, different groups within the organisation and outside the organisation will have very different interests in the challenges that you're facing, different understandings of what's at the root of the challenge and different understandings of what progress on that challenge might look like. And part of the work of leadership is learning to orchestrate and make sense of all these different perspectives, maybe helping some of the factions tolerate some kinds of losses that they may need to go through while they're on the route towards making progress and having longer term gains. Another approach that we often use is establishing a timeline to understand, what's the history of your organisation been, but what's the unfolding history of this challenge been? Because very often this will generate insights and data that are going to be really useful for helping us work with you on overcoming your challenges and helping you, exercise really effective adaptive leadership. So we're looking to experiment our way forward, but we're looking to experiment prudently. We don't want to be blowing things up. We're wanting to create the circumstances in which you can carry on growing and thriving into the future and help you not do the work alone, help you mobilise all the people who are involved in the challenge in the organisation, your different stakeholders, mobilise them so that they, alongside you, can learn more about their most pressing challenges and make significant progress towards overcoming them. If you'd like to talk more to either of us about this, with absolutely no obligation whatsoever, obviously, then please feel free to contact either myself, Neill, at crewleaderdevelopment.com, or my co-founder of the company, Trevor, at crewleaderdevelopment.com. We have a website, which is also just crewleaderdevelopment.com, on which you'll find other free resources, and more information about the kind of work that we do in adaptive leadership and the work that we do in immunity to change coaching, which often goes alongside when it's a question of helping individuals and teams build capacity in different kinds of ways in order to exercise their adaptive leadership more effectively. And it would be an absolute pleasure to hear from you and to have a discussion about whether there are ways in which we can be of service to you and help you make progress on your most important challenges. Thank you very much.